People who traveled the world. What is the craziest story you have? Story 1. When I fell down a flight of stairs in Hungary and broke my back, not a single person stopped to help me while I screamed in pain. I've seen videos from China where it seems to go to an extreme. Someone is run over by a car on a busy street in daylight. Hundreds of people just walk past, cars drive around the body or over it. So life pro tip, don't get injured in China. Getting hit by a car in China is different than other countries because the person at fault has to pay for the victim's medical bills and care for the rest of their life as it relates to the accident. While if the person dies, it is a flat fine to the family. This causes people in China to put their car in reverse and run the person over again to make sure they died. Yikes. Story 2. In Amsterdam, even the guy who mugged me spoke excellent English. Same, but he said he was from Queens, New York, so I don't know. He approached me and a friend on a secluded stretch in a park during daytime, asking for €5 for gas, and even offered to drive us to an ATM if we didn't have any cash. Needless to say, we opted for the "I don't have any money, sorry," and respectfully declined his otherwise generous offer about driving us to an ATM. He's making small talk, in retrospect, buying time, and a guy bikes past us and gives an obvious hand signal to our guy, who immediately looked at the passing biker, and my friend concurrently decides the best way to make him stop asking for €5 was to pull out his wallet and show him how empty it was. Except, he spotted a €5 bill and promptly snatched the wallet angrily as tons of small coins and pennies fell out. He takes the €5 bill and throws the wallet on the ground, walking away, going on about how he's from Queens, New York, and people get got for lying there. Things take an unsurprising turn when he, after having paced off about 4 to 5 meters, decided to come back and pick up the coins while angrily and aggressively lecturing us on the moral and ethical implications of lying, after having just stolen from my friend. On the way back, we coincidentally passed the police station, reported it, saw him get picked up by the cops from the exact spot he approached us. Saw him again at the same spot a day later. He knew. Oh, the irony. This mugger shouldn't be the one to talk about morals and ethics, but I guess it's his way to deflect from his own immoralities. Story 3. My friend was visiting his family in Mexico and was on his way to take his brother to the doctors. Halfway there, one of the car tires pops, and instantly 4 sketchy cars pulled out from the side of the road and blocked my friend's car. It was a setup. Cartel members got out, guns pointed at my friend and his family, demanding for cash and valuables. Unfortunately, my friend was carrying $4,000 in cash, which he was going to use to pay for his brother's medical bills since they didn't have insurance in Mexico. The cartel members took everything, even my friend's passport, and they were left stranded after that. Story 4. Bosnia is full of trash. I love that country, but dang, is it littered. If you're hiking in the countryside and you see a small, lovely path, don't take it. It leads to a dump. Almost every village has one. Story 5. When my father came back from a business trip in China, he had a broken leg. He told us that he had slipped on some stairs. It was only many years later that I found out the Chinese military police had thrown him off a bridge and left him for dead. He was part of an arbitration team that had been brought on in a legal case against the government for negligence. I don't know why he kept it a secret from us for so long, but it certainly changed the way I saw China. Come on, man, you can't just post that and leave without a story. Come on out with it. I was very young, so I don't recall all the details. There was an enormous dam being built in China, and it ran into a number of delays. My dad was called in as an expert witness to find out where the fault lied so that the court case could be settled. Well, as it turns out, the Chinese government was at fault. Big surprise. And he was going to present his findings in court. The Chinese government, it also turns out, doesn't like being sued, especially by foreign white guys, so they figured it would be easier to just make him have an unfortunate accident. Some military guys grabbed him, threw him in the back of a jeep, and tossed him off the side of a bridge from a moving vehicle. Fortunately, there was some deep mud or something that broke his fall and leg. I'm not sure if they actually wanted him dead or just gone. He told me once and we never really spoke of it again. He still travels the world and regularly visits dangerous countries. He just won't go back to China. Story 6. The sheer number of people sleeping on the street, on footpaths, under bridges, in Mumbai and Pune, India. Whole families. I just got back and I'm still thinking about it. There was a lot to love about India, but we saw some heartbreaking things too. The contrast in Pune between the huge tech offices and the homeless people in front really stands out. The contrast in San Francisco between the huge tech offices and the homeless people in front really stands out. Story 7. As a general rule, I enjoyed my visit to Paris. However, I did have a couple of times when I'd visit a shop and the workers would just be D's to me. I speak French okay, but I'm a bit slow, and I'd try to talk in French, and the other shopkeepers would basically laugh in my face or talk about me to each other when I was standing in front of them. Still, only a minor thing. I want to visit France again. Story 8. I was an exchange student in Vietnam. Wonderful experience, but my less fond memories include 1. People literally chasing me up a mountainside trying to sell me coconuts and shrimp flavored Pringles. 14 of them, 1 of me. 2. Eating breakfast when I felt something pull on my leg. A beggar with no limbs had rolled under my table and was biting my pants. 3. Children pooping on the steps of the Hanoi Opera House. 4. Tour buses full of Australians throwing beer cans at people from the windows. 5. Almost dying multiple times while traveling on the scariest roads I've ever seen. 6. Finding out that the windshield in our microbus had been sold and replaced with regular glass when a chicken flew through it. Lots of stitches involved from a very sketchy doctor. 7. Speaking of healthcare, I got a first-hand look at the hospital system after contracting intestinal anthrax. I lost 24 pounds in 5 days, and my hair fell out, along with 2 teeth. I also came back home with tapeworms. Edit, I posted the below in one of my other replies, but I really did have a great experience while studying there, and I highly recommend it as a travel destination. I visited Vietnam at a very interesting time, not that long after relations had been reopened with the US. Almost everyone I met was friendly, positive, and welcoming. I have a lot of great memories, like sneaking out for picnics with the Vietnamese students or attending an underground rock show with them. My history professor from the university coming to the hospital and singing lullabies from his village. A cyclo driver inviting me back to his house for dinner so he could talk about his sisters that had made it out and settled not 20 miles from where I grew up in California. An old lady at the market coming up, taking the money back out of my wallet where it was folded, smoothing it out, and giving me her own money clip to use so Ho Chi Minh's portrait wouldn't get wrinkled. A poet who was obsessed with Kahlil Gibran giving me a copy of all his works he had translated into both English and Vietnamese, so that I wouldn't forget that poetry is truth in any language, and countless other people that went out of their way to make Vietnam feel like a special place in the world. Story 9. I generally tell my stories because I want to share what the experience is really like and help other travelers make safe decisions. That said, my parents will never know that I got robbed in Jerusalem. I still love the city, but I was definitely on guard for the rest of the visit. I just don't want them to think less of me. Oh, and the guy had returned to the same place when I brought the police to the spot, and he still had my stuff, so I got it back, which is nothing short of a miracle. He wasn't the brightest criminal. Story 10. Not too many people are happy to hear Australians shoot and kill kangaroos and on a regular basis, or that we eat them, or that they are primarily pet food. They sell kangaroo burgers in my grocery store. I live in Oklahoma. Story 11. Got robbed in Barcelona. Last night there, got back to the apartment which was locked, and every valuable was gone, but they left our passports and some US dollars. They even took my suitcase. I still think it was a setup from the people renting us the apartment. Police could do nothing. Funny thing was that whoever stole our stuff resold it because a picture of 2 Spanish people showed up on our cloud storage from the tablet. Also, my mom had her wedding ring stolen. The one day in her life she decided to wear a different ring. Edit, to answer a few questions, it was a rental off of verbal.com, with electric locks that used a card to open the front door. Also, it was in a decent neighborhood. My mom took it the hardest. Sister was crying, dad was consoling, and I was ready to fight. Despite all of that, the police were very nice. They actually came to inspect the locks, which showed no signs of forced entry. I still enjoyed my time in Spain, but it's a weird feeling to be violated like that. When my friends and I were in Barcelona, we ran into someone we knew whose group had this exact experience. Must be a thing that happens. We had opted for a big business hotel, which wasn't actually expensive, and I always think that that's the safest option. Story 12. When you go to Southeast Asia, one thing you are struck by is their carefree approach to road safety. From your tuk-tuk, it's typical to see a whole family on a single motorbike, none wearing helmets, zipping through congested traffic without a worry in the world. As a tourist, you know the whole thing is dangerous as hell, but it all seems to work in its own way, and it's even a little charming and exhilarating to experience. On the way to the airport in Thailand, we drove past the carnage of a motorbike accident. No helmet, of course. Rider was plastered across the road. I try not to relive that memory when talking about the trip. A related story I have, in Vietnam, I saw a whole family, as you said, on one motorbike, but the kid was doing his homework on the back of it. I also saw a minor crash, but rather than throwing hands, they got up, brushed off, and cops came and straightened the handlebars out. Story 13. There's a lot of stray dogs in Peru. I've heard that stray dogs are kind of the norm in Latin American countries, and most of the ones I encountered didn't want anything to do with anyone passing by. However, there was one stray that I passed frequently while walking to a project I was working at, and he was extremely aggressive, to the point that I started carrying rocks in my bag in case he chased me. He would follow me for blocks, remaining hidden in a yard until I passed by. He'd bare his teeth and growl. He also slobbered a lot. I didn't think it was rabies, but I'm also not 100% convinced it's not rabies. Story 14. Some guy's D flopping up and down as he staggered half naked, supported by two friends through the streets of Morocco, while loudly cheering. I was honestly pretty impressed. Story 15. In Amsterdam, the hostel I was at had co-ed dorms, so it wasn't uncommon for people to be making love or whatever. New guy moves in next to me on the third day. Third night, he carries in a totally unconscious girl and proceeds to undress her. It was definitely going in a not so good direction. I went and got the hostel supervisor because my German is bad and I was in the rare mood at 19 where I didn't want to get in a fist fight. By the time we're back in the room, about 45 seconds, he's getting her pants off and her shirt is off. The hostel guy starts questioning him. He says it's his girlfriend, but when we ask him her name, he doesn't know it. He's pissed off, starts throwing things all over the place, and gets ejected. We moved her into a private room, the only one in the hostel, and I slept by the door that night. When she woke up in the morning, I told her what happened, and she broke down. It was awful. I've never told anyone that story because Amsterdam was amazing otherwise, and this was a graphic story. Story 16. The harsh level of racism in Japan. There were restaurants that I could be taken to for a business lunch, but only lunch. They were closed to me at night for dinner because I was not Japanese. Other places I wasn't allowed in under any circumstances. The local business partners wouldn't even discuss it. They would just say, no, not possible, and look around uncomfortably. Story 17. Rome. There with a girlfriend. One morning at the hotel breakfast, the receptionist, uninvited, decided to sit next to her and try to spit game. He used weapons-grade Italian charm. He told her she should come spend the day with him, go to a club he knew, dance, drink, watch sunrise at the Forum, then make love. She declined and said she was with me, and pointed to me sitting aghast and mildly amused. He took a sneering look at me and said something like, "What, you're with this English pig? You should be with me, Valentino." He flounced back to his desk and gave me daggers until we left. Kind of ruined the expectations of the place, but God, it's great. Haha, that's ridiculous, but I can confirm, as a girl who was traveling alone through Europe, Italians were by far the sleaziest, creepiest, most insistent ones ever. I once got chatted by a guy who looked at least 20 years older than me on the street at night. He asked for directions, which I'm sure he didn't need, and then asked me out. When I said no, he kept asking why not. I managed to end the conversation and head to the metro station, where he reappeared and tried chatting me up again. As soon as I saw him, I just walked very quickly to the other end of the metro without saying a word. Story 18. I went to jail in Zambia for 3 days over the Easter weekend. I was on a bus to Victoria Falls, and at 5 a.m., our bus was stopped at an illegal checkpoint by the police. I didn't have my paperwork because I was always afraid of getting it stolen. They didn't accept the copies I made of it. My Zambian friends were horrified as I was loaded up on a truck and sent to the local police station. I thought they were just going to take me to immigration, but they put me in a cell instead. I was in there for 3 days and had 3 visits a day from my friends and colleagues. They provided food and water for me. The jail did not feed its prisoners. Some had been in there for weeks and hadn't eaten. I saw beatings nearly every 3 hours, and the police would bring in their friends to beat other prisoners. They would make up charges and demand bribes. There were cockroaches in our cell, and I could feel bugs crawling on me at night. A lot of guys were drunk, and in some cases, violent. I learned that my friends paid off the police so they wouldn't beat me and allowed me to use the bathroom. The US Embassy in Lusaka was notified, and I received a call from a consular officer after it was done. I got out after my friends, who are Zambian, negotiated a $50 bribe to get me out and remove my arrest from their records. I partied like a rock star that night, but after a long shower and a TB test, no one in my family knows, and it's been 3 years. Story 19. Human slavery. I recently took a trip to Dubai. I wasn't sure what to expect. It was a business trip, not a vacation, but for the most part, I had a great time. It was clean, the people were all very friendly, and the city had an astoundingly well-fitted mix of ancient and brand new. Not the coolest place I've ever traveled to, but probably the most interestingly unique. Except the slavery. I had never seen slaves before, but I did in Dubai. I was in my room at a 6-star luxury hotel and realized that for some dang reason, I hadn't packed any socks. So I go to my concierge, we have a couple of locals hired to help us with stuff like this, and ask him where the nearest mall is. It's not far, and he offers to drive me. On the way, we pass some construction, and I see this large group of workers in protective gear eating lunch in the shade of a sign. They were the first people I saw that weren't dressed impeccably. I pointed them out to my helper. Servants, he says. I think they are Sri Lankan. I'd heard that the UAE had some questionable labor standards, so I asked them how much they get paid. They don't. They have to work 2-3 years, then they are free to go and get a good job. Free to go? Yes, they come here and have to work off the trip, usually 2 years. Until then, they belong to the company that brought them from Sri Lanka. So they're like slaves. We don't say slaves, they are servants. They volunteered. Your country had slaves. I told him that, yeah, we did, but that was 150 years ago. We figured out that it was a terrible thing. He didn't seem bothered by it at all. It was weird. Story 20. Border officers in the US tend to be unnecessarily rude. It doesn't matter if you're entering by land or plane, you can feel they don't want you there. I've gone to the US many times, and every single time it is the same. It really is a bummer for it to be your first experience entering the country, as the rest of the trip tends to be great. Story 21. Went to Milan a few months ago. Huge factories, graffiti everywhere, lots of homeless people, shanty towns, boarded up houses, saw a guy attempt to pickpocket someone, and there were huge designer stores all over the city too. There seemed to be an enormous class difference. Only posted the cathedral on Facebook. Story 22. Found a hotel in Yangon, Burma, the day we got there for pretty cheap. They mentioned the rates were low because maintenance was being done on several floors. We sleep fine, wake up and head to breakfast. At breakfast, we met some Germans who had also stayed the night in our hotel. They said they had not slept well because during the middle of the night, someone woke them up to move them from the floor they were on. We, us and the Germans, found out later that they had been moved because they were on one of the levels reserved for maintenance, and part of the maintenance included gassing the rooms for bugs. During the middle of the night, They were just going around the rooms, shoving the gas nozzle or whatever under the doors and letting them run. Wound up killing the 2 people next to the Germans before they realized they'd accidentally booked people on that floor. We weren't on that floor, thankfully, but it has always stuck with me how seemingly easy it could have been to have gotten mixed up in that. Story 23. I was traveling out of the country right after finishing up a huge 5-day work event where I had about 10 hours of sleep total during the 5 days. I got to the motel, which is kind of run down, and the carpet and blankets are damp, but I'm so exhausted, I don't even really think about it. I fall asleep pretty much immediately at like 8 p.m. local time. At maybe 11 p.m. or so, I get a call from the motel phone saying there's been a complaint about noise. I tell them that's impossible, I've been sleeping. They ask me if maybe it's someone else in the room, and I tell them nope, I'm here alone, so there's definitely no one else making noise. They ask me again if I'm sure I'm by myself and not causing any noise. I say yes again. Fall back asleep immediately. When I woke up and thought about it some more, I realized how weird the entire interaction was. There was absolutely no noise I could hear anywhere nearby, and I don't know why the motel staff would need to clarify so many times that I was alone. Apparently they never called, so I assume it must have been someone calling different rooms to see who was in the rooms and how many people. I've never been so glad to always use the extra latch chain lock. This was a good lesson to everyone out there in sketchy places. Never mention the fact that you're alone because it makes you look like an easy target. Also, make sure you don't have a janky latch chain lock because if someone tries to knock your door down or they have keys and force their way in, you better hope the lock is strong enough to hold them back.